Hello, everyone. Today I'm sharing a horror story from a city in the United States. This is one of the scariest true incidents you'll ever hear. Out of respect, I won't mention the exact location, but if you have a horror story to share, feel free to send it to the email in the description box below. My name is Margaret, and I live with two friends in a 3-bedroom apartment where we each have our own room. One of my friends is very wealthy, while the other, Julie, is cared for by her elder sister since her parents passed away when she was young. Her sister is married and lives nearby. Occasionally, Julie would wake up terrified from nightmares and come into my room or our other friend's room in the middle of the night. When her nightmares intensify, we finally asked her to tell us what was haunting her. She began crying before revealing a chilling truth. Julie told us that her father had practiced black magic and that her mother's death was due to it. One day, as a child, Julie had seen her father performing black magic. She recalled that he was a farmer. One day, he brought her to his fields where she played while he said he had to go take care of something. Hours passed and evening fell. When she realized he hadn't returned, she decided to look for him, remembering only the general direction he had taken. As she searched, she eventually reached a cemetery, which didn't scare her since she was so young. She continued looking for him until she heard the sound of digging. When she came closer, she saw her father digging a grave. Terrified, she ran back to the fields. Eventually, her father returned and told her his work was unfinished. He dropped her off at home, saying he'd be back soon to finish what he'd started. That night, Julie heard a cart rolling down the street. Curious, she opened her window and saw her father struggling to push a heavy cart. He took it into a room in their house reserved for his black magic work, a place strictly off limits to everyone else. Through a hole in the wall, Julie watched as her father placed a corpse on a stretcher and began chanting from a book while standing near the body. Suddenly, the shroud covering the corpse lifted as if by some invisible force, and the body sat up, staring directly at Julie through the hole. She screamed, and her father immediately came out, pulled her into the room, and reassured her, saying, "Don't be afraid. He's our friend. He'll protect us." Her parents' relationship had soured over time, largely due to her mother's hatred of black magic. Not long after this incident, Julie's mother died in her sleep. Julie suspected that her father's black magic had something to do with it. We were horrified by her story and suggested she visit her parents' graves for some closure. So we called a taxi and went to her hometown. When we reached the cemetery, Julie began to wail in grief as she neared her parents' graves. While comforting her, I noticed a strange, unsettling wind blowing around her father's grave. We decided to leave, but were blocked at the gate by a snarling dog that suddenly cowered as if something behind us had scared it. When I looked back, there was nothing. Back at the apartment, Julie became unusually quiet and unresponsive. We thought she was grieving her parents. That night, we heard sounds in the kitchen. When I went to check, I found Julie making 2 cups of tea. When I asked her why, she replied that her guest had come to her room. Alarmed, I looked into her room, but no one was there. I shared this with our other friend, and we called Julie's sister to tell her about Julie's strange behavior, sleeping all day and making 2 cups of tea at night. Julie's sister came to stay with us and witnessed these behaviors herself. Eventually, she decided to call in a girl about our age who was a professional in dealing with black magic. This girl spent some time observing Julie and then told us to ask her about the teacups. When we asked, Julie calmly said she was making tea for her lover who visited her room. The girl insisted on seeing him, which Julie refused, saying, "You can't handle how he looks." But the girl persisted, so Julie finally agreed. As we entered her room, a sudden power outage occurred, and it started raining heavily. During a flash of lightning, we saw a figure of man wrapped in a shroud with cotton in his nostrils. It was the same corpse her father had raised through black magic. We screamed and ran out of the room. The girl who was helping us, however, sat down and began chanting something. Just then, the power returned and the figure vanished. Julie collapsed, calling out the name of her friend. The next day, she was back to her usual self. But that wasn't the end. Later, the girl chanted again, and Julie fainted. She then wrapped Julie in a shroud, sprinkled talcum powder around her, and started chanting once more. Suddenly, the door burst open, and we heard footsteps entering the room, leaving footprints in the powder around Julie's body. The footsteps circled her and then left the room. That night, we tied Julie to her bed, but when we awoke, she had disappeared. The girl helping us asked to go to the place where Julie had spent her childhood. We all got in the car and returned to Julie's hometown. In the cemetery, we found Julie lying in an uncovered grave. She regained consciousness and, seeing the cemetery, began crying, recognizing the same graveyard where she'd seen her father digging all those years ago. Finally, the girl asked us to show her the room in Julie's house that her father had used for black magic. We returned, unlocked the door, and entered. It felt as if an invisible force was trying to stop us, but we pushed through. Inside, we found a coffin with a decayed body inside. The girl instructed us to take the body back to the cemetery and bury it properly to end the curse. Although we were terrified, we did as she asked for Julie's sake. Afterward, Julie recovered completely thanks to that girl. If you want to hear more horror stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Bye for now, until the next video.